So what do people know about Tu B'Shvat? We didn't really talk about it. Kind of skipped it. Anybody know anything about Tu B'Shvat? Yeah, Chelsea, unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to celebrate the trees, right?
So here's the
And
thing. Anybody else? Yeah, go on.
and it's the 15th day of the month
Of Shvat. Yep.
of Shvat.
So there are 4 New Years in the halachic calendar. One of them is Rosh Hashanah. That's the new year where we count the years that the world has been in being, has been created. That's the new year that we're most familiar with. But there's also a new year for kings, Jewish kings, where you count, and that's when you start counting their years. Like if they started their reign a day before, then the next day would be their second year. It's just the way it is. And then there's one for taking tithes, I think, from animals, which we don't have to deal with as a rule, but people did. They gave it to the priests, to the Kohanim, they gave some to the Levim, to the Levites. And that also is like animals born from a certain year. So if, let's say, you took however much percent you need to take, then you have to restart that again. You're counting from a certain date. And the fourth one is this one, the Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of Shvat. By the way, Tu B'Shvat, Tu is actually 2 Hebrew letters that Tet and Vav. Tet is 9. The numerical value of Tet is 9, and the numerical value of Vav is 6. So 2 together, the Vav is just an U sound. It's a vowel there. The 2 together is 9 plus 6. That's what makes it the 15th. The reason we don't do base 10 like 15, which is 10 and 5. So in Hebrew, that would be Yud and Hey, and the letters Yud and Hey spell God's name. So in general, we don't just write God's name, which is the reason that it's done with 9 and 6. It's as if instead of calling it 15, we call it 9 plus 6. But of course, it doesn't work that way in the way we do numbers. So the 15th day of Shvat, which is really the beginning of spring in Israel, not here, but in Israel, there really is an almond tree that flowers around this time. Beautiful white and pink. It only lasts 2 or 3 weeks. It's really beautiful. And that is when you have to start counting to tithe and give whatever you need to give for new fruit. Now, it may just be the fruits that are indigenous and special to a land of Israel. I'm not 100% sure, but it is the ones that you say that special blessing of created the fruit of the trees. And so what happened is that over time, Tu B'Shvat didn't have so much significance to us because we don't have a temple, so we don't have anybody to give tithes to. We don't bring special offerings. But it felt like because it's about flowering and it's about spring and reawakening and growing and growth from the silence of the fall or the winter, rather, when things are bare. It's about potential and renewal. And so it was reclaimed and overlaid with I guess some mystical properties. There's like we have a Seder for Pesach, for Leil HaSeder. There's also a Seder, which just means an organization, one after the other, an order. There's a special Seder for Tu B'Shvat, and that's actually kind of beautiful. Maybe I'll do one next year. If I do one, I'll put it on Zoom. So in a Tu B'Shvat Seder, what you do is you go through 4 different types of grapes. You could do it with grape juice. You don't need to do it with wine. And it's like red, there's pink, there's white, and it goes through the different months of the year, and you have different verses to say. It's just a nice way to celebrate fruits and to celebrate nature. You could bring in whatever you want. So some people do it. It takes a while to do the Seder, but it's kind of cool. We consider doing it for women maybe next year. Sorry, Jeff. And because I've done it with women, I think it's very nice. It feels special. Learn something. I don't know. I think it could be nice. In any case, why would we then have dried fruit and not fresh fruit?
Is it
Not a
because
trick.
like this is the start of the growing season, so you'd only
I
have
think
dried
they just
around?
didn't have. Yeah, I think, or maybe it was done in Europe and they just didn't have fresh fruit at that time, but they had dried fruit. So there's no reason why dried fruit should actually be what we use for Tu B'Shvat, but it makes sense because it's available. And I guess over time it just became a thing. So why not? If it's a thing, just keep it. Well, I have to say that the types of dried fruit has really exponentially exploded compared to what I had as a young child. You know, maybe we had raisins and prunes, maybe apricots. It was actually dried carob, which is disgusting. Dry, it's literally dries out your mouth. You can barely swallow it. It's called in Yiddish, I think, Buxer. And so Buxer was always. By the way, did you know that the carob, this is just a piece of information of trivia. Do you know how it has little seeds in it? You know that? Do you ever see it? It's like this size and it's brown. They're all exactly the same size, and that is the weight of a carat for diamonds. I know, right? Cool piece of trivia. I guess that's what they had, or just felt right. Okay, so that's Tu B'Shvat, and I love the way it has, because it's not really, oh, it's not biblical for sure. It's for sure rabbinic. It's not in the Torah. It's the rabbis set up certain dates to be I mean, they learned it from verses, but they set it up. But it doesn't have, well, that's not true. Maybe it is. I mean, one second. It was set up by the rabbis, but its ramifications are biblical, because tithing, you know, giving a certain amount to the priests and to the Levites or to the poor, there were all different ways that tithes were given. It was a way of creating a more just society. The the priests and the Levites did not own land, so they didn't have a way. They were teachers and they worked in the temple, so they didn't really have a way to have produce, so or even to have herds at the time. But the ramifications of setting up a date make it a biblical ramification, because there's a biblical commandment to tithe. Does that make sense? But the rabbis had to decide what that day is. But it has no ramification for us, except that people don't fast on that day. They don't. If there's a funeral, you say fewer sad things. You remove certain parts of the prayer service, which is sadder. So that's the only true ramification for us today. So it's really beautiful that different sects, different groups of people found ways to overlay it in a manner that feels relevant and more modern, like talking about reuse, talking about green, talking about celebrating planting, the time when in Israel traditionally people planted trees. In fact, there's a movement now to plant 1,400 trees in memory of the 1,400 people who were killed at the Nova Festival on October 7th. And it's actually being planted down there in the Gaza envelope, it's called, those settlements that are around Gaza. If anybody's interested, we have it in our emails and on the website for people who want. It's a beautiful way, really, to rebuild Israel, literally rebuild it, and at the same time have it in memory of somebody. So that just feels like a nice way to do it. And we've gotten through a very nice amount of trees so far. Okay, so that's Tu B'Shvat. Any questions? Gabby, you know now why we have dried fruit?
I do.
Okay, great. All right, I wanted to start talking about life cycle. So I think it'll take us 3 times. I'm not sure, probably. This is the beginning of life. So it's all the different life cycles that happen at the beginning of life. And next time we'll move to bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, engagement, wedding, maybe divorce as well, just so you know about it. And the last one, the third of our unit of life cycles will be about burial, death, all those, there are many different terms that we use, and it's actually quite beautifully done in Judaism, and you should know those terms. You should know about them. Hopefully you have not experienced that up close, but it happens pretty much to everybody in our lives, and this way you'll also know when other people, what does that mean? When is your shloshim up? Like, okay, what does that sentence actually mean? But it really means something. Or when is your year up? Or what side do you tear Kriya on? So all of those things we'll unpack, and I'll give you those buzzwords so you'll understand what they are. And so I think that's the way we're going to do it. Does that make sense to people? I mean, we might get the bar and bat mitzvah today. I just couldn't tell how long it would take to get through everything. So we might get to that today as well. But the source sheet for now has the beginning of life. I don't know if you have time to look at it because I always seem to send it right before. I actually just made it today. I'm sure I had one, but I didn't. So I made one today. So let's go through and see what are the different rituals surrounding beginning of life. Now, I'm not referring to like the actual birth process, for example. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the rituals that happen once the baby is born. Okay. Okay. So 1 second.
Gosh.
All right. The first thing that happens, first of all, we do have to know that as often as the case, there is a differentiation in the number of rituals surrounding baby boy being born and a baby girl being born. And the truth is, I think there really wasn't very much for baby girls other than giving her a name. I mean, my first granddaughter, I can't think of any of my girls. No, my girls, we did a little like party, a kiddush on Shabbat for them. But a lot of people, just name the baby and show, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But it's nice to mark it in some way. But there are a lot of religious rituals around the boy, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the boy goes through circumcision. That's why that I think that's part of it. Okay. The first thing is something called like Shalom Zachar or Shalom Zachar, which literally means welcome male. That is literally what it means. At this point, people don't think about what the word means, but it means welcome to a baby boy. And because a brit or bris or brit milah, whatever you pronounce it, because it happens on the 8th day from when the baby is born. So say the baby is born on Tuesday, the brit will be on Tuesday. Now, what if the baby is born Tuesday night? When is the brit? Anybody? Hello? Talk, talk, talk. If the baby is born Tuesday night, when do you think the brit will be? You can get it wrong. It's okay. That's how we learn. Yes. Go ahead, Tifara Ruth.
Tuesday.
So Chelsea suggests Tuesday. Tifara Ruth. Also?
Wednesday.
I was going to say Wednesday morning. Does it have to be during the day or the morning? I feel like it seems like a lot are in the morning.
Right. But here it's not so much about, yes, in the morning, whether it's Tuesday or when, well, it could be afternoon, by the way. It's just during the day. It's not done at night. Yeah. But the question here is not whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. The question is, will it be on Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week? That's the question. So here's the thing. How do you count days in Judaism?
Starting at the night.
Starting at the night. So Tuesday night is actually
Wednesday.
So what you need to know is when exactly was the baby born? Was the baby born before the sunset or after the sunset? Now, can I tell you something? It actually happened to me. I didn't have as any of the other kids, and they were all girls, so it wouldn't have necessarily made a difference. But my son was born at 5:40, they said, although in retrospect, I was told it should have been a day, or it should have been, I was told it's when the afterbirth comes out. But I was told by a mohel much later that it's actually when the head crowns, which was before the sunset. So he was born on Tuesday, actually. They said it at 5:40. And guess what time sunset was? 5:37. So he was 3 minutes into Wednesday. And the brit was either going to be Purim, which, as you know, is a very busy day, right? There's reading the Megillah and running around giving gifts, and everybody gets dressed up. Very busy day. Or that would have been the following Tuesday. And if it was Wednesday, it would have been Shushan Purim, which is only celebrated in Jerusalem. But I lived in Israel, and I had most of my family lived in Jerusalem. So for somebody, it was going to be very, very inconvenient, no matter how you look at it. And so here's the thing. A brit can only be at the minimum 8 days. If the baby is not up to it, is not well, is jaundiced or whatever, there's any sort of danger, You can always do it on the 9th day or the 10th day or the 11th, whenever he's well. But you can't do it on the 7th day. That would be not a brit. That would be, you'd have to like do something else afterwards, which I'll tell you what that is. So if there was a doubt about when he was born on Tuesday or Wednesday, because he was born right in that little, 15, 20 minutes when it straddles both, you would have to take the later date because you couldn't err on the side that maybe he was born Tuesday night. And then if we do it on Tuesday, would be only 7 days from his birth. You must err, ERR, on the side of later. You must say, you know what, if we don't know if it's Tuesday or Tuesday night, then you have to go with Tuesday night. Does that make sense? Because it's okay to have a brit on the 9th day, but it's not okay to have a brit on the 7th day, and you don't know, right? Okay. In any case, they told me that it was 5:40. In retrospect, it should have been a day earlier, but I can't change that. I mean, he's 41. Nobody's changing that at this point. About to be 42. And the brit was on Shushan Purim, which is, so my uncle, who was the Sandaki, I'll tell you, the godfather, he held the baby. He traveled from Jerusalem to Haifa, which is like a very long drive. It's a solid 2.5, 3 hours at the time. And he got up really early to hear the Megillah. It was very sweet that they really came all the way from Jerusalem to Haifa. But I'm saying, like, it really makes a difference in Judaism what day, and you have to do it according to the time. You have to be very exact. Now, this is also 41, 42 years ago. We didn't have Google. We didn't have other things to look up. It was whoever said anything in the moment. So if the midwife or whoever it was who wrote it down wrote 5:40, the person doing the circumcision, wasn't going to argue. So he just took that at face value. I didn't know enough to ask, when should we just determine the date? Now, I remember saying to myself, from now on, anytime you have a baby, make sure you look at the clock to know exactly. Well, the other 3 were not even close to being during that time, middle of the night, whatever it was. So, or middle of the afternoon, when it's the light out. Okay. So the Shalom Zachar, remember what we said is that, or Shalom Zachar, you'll hear both of them, Shalom Zachar or Shalom Zachar. Because a baby boy, remember Shalom Zachar is welcome to a male baby, because a brit is always straddles a Shabbat, right? If you have 8 days, it's always going to cover, the baby is going to go through all 7 days of the week, and it's going to be the next week on the day that he was born, because you always count day 1, the day that he was born. Everybody with me? Good? Yeah, okay. So there's this teaching that on Shabbat we should have a special something and celebrate. It's more of a, I would call it voodoo, but that's not really what it is. But it's a way of kind of giving him support from the community because he's about to go through a hopefully minor surgical procedure. So on Shabbat, people get together. Traditionally, only men got together. I would say now that has changed a little bit, as it depends on which community. In the modern Orthodox community, you might very well find that women are there as well. Also, it used to be that women were in the hospital after having a baby for like 3 days, even 4 days. So they may not even have been home for Shabbat. So with Shalom Zachar or Shalom Zachar, what does that look like? Generally, it's the father. Occasionally, the grandparents do it, and the parents aren't even there. They might be in the hospital or just not available, not feeling well enough. And they make this cake, there's fruit, there's usually chickpeas, arbis. They're called arbis in Yiddish. I happen to love chickpeas. They signify the world going round, because they're round. Nobody's going to have a hard-boiled egg. That would be another thing. But arbis is traditionally something that's served at a Shalom Zachar. And then some people might share a word of Torah and do a little bit of song and some eating. When my youngest grandson was born 1.5 years ago, I was in Israel, and my kids, my daughter and my son-in-law, were not in any shape to prepare a Shalom Zachar. But I said, no, you got to have one. So I cleaned up and prepared, and organized, and people brought cake and fruit, and it was so lovely. And my daughter she was so happy that we did it. And she said, okay, I'm done. I don't need the whole big brit party. And I'm like, yeah, you have no choice. You have to have a brit. That is not up for consideration, because that is a biblical commandment, is to have a brit. And it was also beautiful. But the Shalom Zachar was more intimate. Everybody got that? Now, I would say there are places where I'd heard where people did Shalom Nekeva, which is the female version, hello, female, or welcome. But if you don't have to make a party Friday night just after you had a baby, like, why would you? So there's no real tradition about that. I mean, usually the mom's not feeling well, everybody's harried, there may be older kids, it's hard. And people won't necessarily go out of their way to do something because they wouldn't even expect you to do it. So that could feel unfair, but that is the truth. That is just the way it works in general. So the first thing that we have, very first traditional, is the traditional something get together is is the Shalom Zachar or Shalom Zachar. There's something in general. Oh, I will add one thing which I didn't put down because it doesn't really have a name. And that is that little children often gather around the baby's bed or crib the night before the actual brit happens, the circumcision, and say Shema Yisrael. I still remember doing that as a child. Now it's more of a Hasidic minhag custom, but you may hear of it being done. For a girl, I just snuck in here the girls. Simchat Bat means joyous celebration for a baby girl. Joyful or joyous, maybe. Simcha is like Simchat Torah or Simchat Torah, which means joy with the Torah. So Simchat Bat, Bat is the girl, like Bat mitzvahs for a girl, same thing. So with Simchat Bat is when you have a celebration, any celebration for the birth or naming. I mean, if you're just naming a baby in shul, I wouldn't call it a Simchat Bat. A Simchat Bat means some sort of a party, meaning some sort of gathering, celebration, some food to some level. You don't have to do it, but it's nice. The next thing is something called Zeved Habad. Zeved Habad is an actual ceremony that in Sephardic communities, somebody wrote it. It's actually in the Koren Siddur. So people have, but I don't know if it's in the, I don't know if it's in the transliterated. Let me see. I'm somehow doubting it, but you can always look up Zeved Habad. I'm sure you'd find it. No. Yeah, I don't think it has Lifecycle. Okay. And so what happens is it quotes certain verses, it has prayers that are said, and it's been now adopted by many people because why not use something that's already written? There's a beautiful ritual already written. Why not use that? And often you'll see people bringing the baby in. It's an honor. The aunt brings the baby in, or uncle or whatever. Grandparents bring the baby in, and then they give a blessing to the girl. The baby is named. Now, in our shul in HIR, we do everything with ceremony and with song. And it's actually quite beautiful because we slow things down. We don't just rush through and blah, 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 and mumble them, but we actually sing the baby's name out loud in song, which is really beautiful as well. Again, Simchat Bat is any celebration to name a baby girl and bring her into this world in a joyous manner. But Zeved Habad is a specific ceremony that has nothing to do with the food, for example. That has to do with the ceremonial aspect. Everybody with me? Okay, cool. Brit Milah or Bris Milah, I mean, you might hear both things, a bris or a brit. Brit actually means covenant, but when people say a bris or you're going to the brit, you're going to a brit, it's the shortened version of circumcision. Milah is actually the word for circumcision, but that doesn't really matter. And that is actually a biblical commandment, and it's a male Jew who has not gone through circumcision, I believe, is not allowed to partake in, for sure, one mitzvah. That's the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, the communal paschal lamb. Obviously, we don't have that today, so it's not an issue, but because we don't have the temple or offerings. But and why is that? Because the brit is the mark that male, that person, has joined the Jewish identity in the Jewish community. Now, within the brit, you'll see that it has more or less pieces that are prescribed, but it can be done with song. It can be done with explaining. There's certain places where it's done, and they just kind of rush through it. I mean, I'm not talking about the person doing the circumcision. He should rush through it, but or rush as much as he thinks he needs to do. But I'm talking about the whole ceremony around it to explain what's going on and to introduce people. There are certain honors that you can get for a brit. The baby comes in, people welcome. You might welcome with song. People pass the baby. That's considered to be in merit of having their own children. Sometimes it's given to a married couple who don't have children, or have one, or don't have a boy, or whatever it is, and so it's given as this is the good luck charm side of Judaism. That we have a lot of rituals that, and it's very sweet actually to give it to a couple. One hands it to the other, hands the other, because the baby is bringing a lot of joy and luck with him. And then there's putting him down on. We believe that Elijah the prophet appears, whatever that means, at every brit. And we say this is the chair of Elijah. So one person gets to put the baby on the chair. Then there's the godfather who holds the baby on his knees as the mohel does his job. So there are opportunities for different people to have different honorary roles. Does that make sense? Now, the last thing for a boy as a baby, not the last thing actually, is something called the pidyon haben. So that means the redeeming, actually it means the redeeming of the boy, but it really means the firstborn. So anybody hear of this, the redeeming of the firstborn? Anybody know anything about this?
I feel like I've heard of
think it
it, but
gets
I
a
don't
little bit-
remember what it is.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. No problem. It's good that you've heard of it. I'm glad that you've heard of it. A pidyon haben or a pidyon haben. And by the way, when kids are little, they hear pigeon, like pigeon haben. They don't know what they're saying. So they think it's like a pigeon or bird. They think there's a bird that's going to come, pigeon haben, because the D and the Y kind of get conflated there when people speak in America speak of Hebrew. Okay, so we know about the 10th plague. People know about that. That's the plague of the slaying of the firstborn in Egypt. Everybody know about that? 10th plague? Okay. This actually has nothing to do with it, and yet it feels very tied to it because it happened soon after they left Egypt. So it does feel like there's something. Now, what does anybody here know about firstborn biblically? Any thoughts, any knowledge, or even just historically? Any thoughts? Yeah, Chelsea.
Isn't it traditionally the firstborn gets the first blessing?
The first blessing. Oh, the blessing. Oh, you mean like that Jacob stole, Yaakov stole,
Yeah.
Esau stole. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that traditionally, at least in those times and biblically, that the firstborn was attributed to having more skill and to getting more. As a matter of fact, according to Torah law, and I believe this is only for men, but I haven't checked it for women, that let's say there's 3 children in the family, you actually have to divide your inheritance into 4, and the firstborn gets double, which immediately creates envy and strife. So that just doesn't feel very good. So there are ways to get around it by putting in loopholes and clauses. But I agree that the firstborn has some sort of kind of magical thinking because I find that really, I mean, maybe it was like that at those times, but why does the firstborn necessarily have the skill set or the propensity to be, to follow in his father's business or mother or whatever it is? There's no reason. I don't understand it. But firstborns, and actually there are a lot of studies about how firstborns act and how they're leaders, but not always true. In any case, the firstborn were slated to be the ones to work in the temple. The firstborn males, only men were appointed to work in the temple. They were slated to be, now we don't really know it so much because they so quickly lost that privilege. And what happened is, remember the sin of the golden calf, where they worship the golden calf? Anybody? If somebody does not remember, please raise your hand. Thank you, Jamie. When Moses went up to Mount Sinai, and he said, "I'm going to be gone for 40 days." and I'm receiving the Torah from God. I'll come back down and I'll teach it to you. And the Israelites got very nervous because they miscounted days. They either counted the first day or they thought it was whatever it is. And they thought he was going to come back on day, ended being day 39. And he was only supposed to come back next day. And like, okay, that's it. He said 40, but he is not coming back. They got very nervous. And, they did idol worship at the time. It's not something that speaks to us. It's a little hard for us to understand why they needed it. But they did feel that they needed something as a leader. Why they couldn't ask for a person, I don't know. But one of the, I would say, the most severe, other than like killing someone, kidnapping someone, hurting someone, one of the most severe sins that you could do according to the Torah, which raises God's wrath, is to worship another God. And idol worship was very common. It still is possibly common in certain places. We're not so familiar with it, so we don't exactly understand what pulls people, most of us don't understand what pulls people to worship, but an idol that clearly has no power. So in any case, idol worship is the most heinous of crimes because it is as if our prophets often compare it to an adulterous wife who wandered off, to another lover instead of staying with God. And what happened was they took the men, not the women, just saying, took their gold and their jewelry and they brought it to Aharon, Moshe's brother, and they said, make us a god. Now, there's even a medrash that says that they first came to somebody else, I don't remember who it was, and that he was killed because he refused to cooperate. And Aaron's like, okay, this is like not worth it. I'll just be killed. And what's that going to help? Then somebody else will be killed, or whatever his thought was. So he decided to do that. He threw it into the fire and out came a golden calf. Now, we actually have some sources that teach us that God appears occasionally in the form of a bull or a calf. So it doesn't seem so far off, but there still was a big mistake worshiping an inanimate object rather than waiting for Moshe or still believing in God or listening to Aharon, who was saying, no, he's coming back tomorrow. Just give him 24 hours. And because they made that big mistake, God told the firstborn, you are not worthy of serving in the temple. Okay, everybody did it, but the firstborn were slated to work in the temple, and that was taken away from them. I know it's a very long buildup. There's no easy way for me to explain it to you easier and quickly. The only tribe out of all the tribes who did not take part in the sin of the golden calf, which was a serious sin. In fact, when Moshe came down and saw them dancing around the golden calf, he smashed the tablets. Now, in retrospect, God said, could you smash the tablets? Because the Jews weren't ready for it yet. But in the moment, it feels very harsh. Just went up to get it. God appeared to them in thunder and lightning and amazing and sound and light show like you've never seen and said, I'm your God. I took you out of Egypt. You're my people. And Moshe says, just wait for me. I'm going for 40 days to learn Torah. I won't eat. I won't drink. I'll be kind of like an angel. I'll come down. I'll teach you. And 39 days later, they're. So God said to the firstborn, you are not worthy. But there was one tribe that did not take part. Which tribe was that?
Levi?
Nice. Good job, Chelsea. Yes, Levi. Now, Levi actually divided into two different groups. Kohanim, the priests, and Leviim, the Levites, even though that's Levi. And if you remember, Aharon and Moshe were brothers. Aharon became the first Kohen, the high priest, and Moshe became the first Levi. And in the temple, the Kohanim do the service, and the Leviim, it's actually quite beautiful. They play the lute and they play the cymbals, and they do all the music. They burn the incense. They actually get very nice jobs. Like instead of dealing, I guess, so much with the blood of the offerings, they get to do, beautiful incense and play music. They do wash the Kohanim's hands and feet. And in fact, nowadays, before the priests, the Kohanim bless us in the shul, well, here we only do it high holiday and in the holidays, but in Israel you do it every day and then on Shabbat. They wash their hands. They still retain that part. And the pecking order, so to speak, in Judaism is first Kohanim and then Levim, Levites, and then Yisrael, which is most of us. Most of us are not Kohanim or Levim. I'm talking about the men specifically, although the women play a role right here in the Pidyon bench. So what happened was God said the Levites didn't take part. They're going to do the service from now on. But in order to remind us of the importance and what we lost, there's a ritual where we redeem. It's symbolic. We redeem the firstborn by basically doing an exchange. We say to a Kohen, we have to pick a priest, a Kohen, and we say, what do you want? These 5 pieces of silver, which are $5 silver nowadays usually, or my son, and he says, I want the $5 silver, and all is good. But the reason that it's so sweet and lovely, by the way, my son is a Bechor. Bechor is the oldest, the firstborn, and we did a Pidyon Ben for him. Oh, it's like 30 days after you had the baby, the mom feels way better. Hopefully everything's a little calmer than 8 days after. I totally enjoyed the Pidyon Ben way more than I enjoyed the Brit Milah when I was still such a mess from the delivery. So there's something really nice, and it doesn't happen very often. Why doesn't it happen very often? So let's go through it, okay? First of all, half of the population are girls. So if the firstborn is a girl, that's it. It has to be the firstborn. And by the way, it's the firstborn of the mother. So if a man had a second wife, for example, a Kohen had a second wife, not a Kohen, a man, total blank. A man had a second wife, and that second wife also her first child was a boy, they would again do a Pidyon Ben. Kind of cool. Okay. Now, if the mom comes from a Kohen family or a Levi family, or the dad comes from a Kohen or Levi family, they're considered part of the good guys, so to speak, the ones who were part of the service for God and did not take part in the sin. So in those cases, you don't do a Pidyon Ben. So first of all, let's start with 50%, right? We said only if the boy is first. Everybody with me? If the mom had a miscarriage, usually it has to be the first. So if the miscarriage was really, really early, then it's considered like she didn't have. But if she had any sort of she lost the baby beforehand after a certain time, again, no Bechor, no Pidyon Ben. If the baby was born by C-section, then it's Peter Rechem means the opening of the womb. So that would be vaginally. So if somebody is born by C-section, doesn't qualify for being a Bechor in this particular aspect of it, because they didn't open the womb in the usual way. So it's just interesting. And so anybody whose mom is the daughter of a Kohen or the daughter of a Levi, or father is a Kohen or a Levi, remember, it gets passed through the dad. Or the firstborn was a girl, or there was a miscarriage or something before, or was a C-section. So you can see that the number of times that you have a Pidyon Ben gets smaller and smaller over time, right? As you go through the math, the percentages. Everybody with me on that? I think I was told, but I don't know if that's true, that only 10% of first babies actually end up having a Pidyon Ben. Oh, if the mother's a convert, I believe also you don't do. I believe also there's no Pidyon Ben. So and of course, if the father, well, then he wouldn't be a Kohen or a Levi. Yes.
Sorry, it takes me so long to unmute. Sorry. That was my question. I think you answered it. It was like the convert question. So
I think that I'm not sure, but I think it has to be Jewish from birth, but I don't actually remember. I have to look that up. I just feel like I read that. So in any case, as you can see, the Pidyon Ben doesn't happen that often. So when it happens, it feels special. There's no cutting. The baby's not crying. The mom's not just had a baby, so it's like a sweet, nice gathering, and that's about it. That's like the whole part of Pidyon Ben, but just so you know about it. Yes.
And just back to the Brit, is the mother required to be there? Like, I know there must be a minyan that's generally to men, like, but is there any
You don't actually need them. You don't need a minyan.
Oh, I thought you needed a minyan.
We
Okay.
discovered that. Well, you usually have one. because, you know, you invite
Yeah, just
people.
naturally, right.
But during COVID, we discovered a lot of things that don't need a minion, including a wedding.
Oh, right. Okay.
Including a wedding, you don't need it. You might prefer it because it feels nicer, but you don't
Okay.
need it. So does the mother have to be there? She does not have, nobody has to be there. Well, the father should be there, but you could
Father, I was
appoint,
thinking.
so that's what I wrote in the file, if you look it up, that in our source sheet, that the onus is on the father to do a brief for his son. But like, we have people in our community who are single mothers by choice.
Yeah.
There's no father in the picture. So it's interesting that the onus does not go to the mom, it goes to the community, from the father to the community. And then if for some reason the boy doesn't have a brief, it is on him once he becomes bar mitzvah. It is his responsibility to not circumcise himself, but to get himself circumcised.
Gotcha.
And it's interesting. I actually, my friend's father is a mohel. He's a very, very well-known and famous mohel, super, super nice guy in Chicago. And he did like thousands and thousands and thousands, like many, many, many. And when there was an influx of people from Russia who were coming to America, once there was, what's it called when he opened up the doors? Perestroika, something. Perestroika, and they were allowed to leave. There were many, many Russian men. Remember what I said? If you're past bar mitzvah, it's your responsibility to be circumcised. So he said he took a special course to learn how to circumcise adult men. And he did hundreds, if not thousands of those, which is a huge kindness to train in that. And it's not the same thing doing a little baby and doing an adult, but he trained in it, which I thought was fascinating. Yes, Jamie.
I have a question on that. So, was that rabbi a doctor, or was it Jew?
I didn't say rabbi. He was a mohel.
Oh, sorry,
A
mohel.
mohel is the ritual. I mean, he might be a rabbi. It's possible, but anybody could be a rabbi. Theoretically, you could be, you know, anything and be a rabbi if you learned the rabbinical studies and passed the test. So, but he doesn't have to be a rabbi. He has to learn how to be a mohel. He better get a lot of experience from somebody, be trained well, hopefully. So what was your question?
Does he need to be a doctor?
Definitely not. As a matter of fact, overall, a mohel who does ritual circumcision is generally, because that's all he does, he's really, really, really good at it. And probably in some ways better than doctors, just because doctors probably don't do them as often. Because there are urologists or pediatric urologists who do it, but it doesn't count as a ritual circumcision. But for men who have had circumcision as a child, let's say, because many people do that with their children, they still need something called taking a pin prick, a pin drop of blood from the penis or from the wherever it is that they take it from. The mohel here, who's our best, he said, he promised me, not that it makes a difference to me, but he promised the people who needed to do it, like, it doesn't really hurt. I guess it's a little bit like taking from the finger or something. So that's a lot easier. But of course, men who are converting, who have to do a circumcision, obviously it's not the most pleasant thing for them, right? It's hard. Most people don't remember their circumcision at 8 days.
What happens if there isn't a mohel in your community?
That's a great question. First of all, during COVID, there was a huge, huge issue. I think it was in Australia or somewhere. And remember, there was no flight. You couldn't go in and out. It was not easy. So you have to fly one in. As a matter of fact, Scott and Felicia, I don't know if you met them. They're actually coming for their conversion in 2 weeks. I mean, for her conversion and the baby. And they're getting married the same day. I'm going to marry them. And who's Patty? Hi, Patty. You want to unmute and come on? Hi. I don't hear you. I still don't hear you. I do. Does anybody hear who that is? I really don't hear you well. Beautiful picture of a dove, though. So when their baby was born, so remember the baby was born to Felicia who hadn't converted yet. So the baby is not Jewish yet. But what they did was they did a brief in the name, l'shem gior, meaning for the purpose of conversion. So he doesn't have to go through anything again from the point of view of conversion, of circumcision, the baby, but he will still be immersed. When the mom gets immersed, he'll also be immersed. Why did I say that? Because they live in Austin, and there was no mohel in Austin. And he asked me, and if I know, and we were looking, and he finally, I mean, I was trying to find one on the East Coast, but it's like a big, it's even if they pay for it, but it's a lot of hours to travel to do the circumcision. But they were able to find one, I don't know where, but somewhere in Texas that felt much closer. But yes, that is an issue. But you can't, Gabby, you can't just not do it. You have to figure out a way to do it. The people who live in remote areas, they might not do it at 8 days, which is not ideal, but you do the best you can. So then they travel as soon as they can, or they bring a mohel in. That's just, it's not trivial. I
Okay, and
don't
this is
envy somebody who has to deal with it.
like, and that's something that there might be particular mohels who are more traveling, or would you just have to reach out to some and see if they'd be
Well, I mean,
interested?
somebody who's in New York who's probably doing a lot of them every day, he doesn't need to travel. So I would say it would be in more sparsely populated areas, or like a Chabad person who's like, that's his thing, is to be available. You know, it's an issue. I mean, it's a real issue.
Are you allowed to travel with a baby to do it? It might be an issue when we have kids where it might not. There's a big
Are you
thing where
allowed
they
to?
don't
You
want.
mean, oh, I see. Are
Yeah,
you
like they
allowed
don't
to
want
mass
medical
circumcision?
professionals performing surgeries, which they consider Jewish circumcision a surgery outside of like particular venues. So we might have the particular issue where we legally would not be allowed to do it if things
And
like that
how,
happen.
where's the closest Jewish city from where you are?
Maybe Toronto, which would
And how far?
be like a 4-hour flight.
Oh, wow, that's the closest?
We're basically in the middle of nowhere.
So, how do you get kosher food? That just sounds so complicated.
We have like a few. There are like a couple of different grocery stores have kosher food. So like we're
Cool.
fine that way. It's just
And there's a shul, there's an Orthodox shul.
yes.
So, oh, you're saying you couldn't fly a mohel in?
Yeah, like if our laws change, we wouldn't be allowed to fly one in. Unless they weren't for some reason. If they weren't a doctor, I guess maybe we could.
Right, they're not a
Yeah.
doctor.
Okay.
No, they're not doctors. And ask
Yeah.
other people in the community. You're not the first one to have that problem. I assume there are boy children in the community.
Yeah. Like there is
So
there were two.
you'll figure it
One,
out.
yeah, okay.
You'll figure it out. But yes, you will have to deal with it. And if it's flying 4 hours, nobody wants to do that a week after they had a baby. So that's a lot. And a lot of pediatricians, unless you absolutely had to, you know, you just wouldn't want to fly, right? Exposing them to germs and stuff. So not so trivial. And unfortunately, they'd have to have it a little later. So not the best. Or you actually go to Toronto for the 9th month. Like that's a possibility, right? So that you'll be there. I mean, it's possible. I don't know if you can, but you'd have to figure it out. So when you get there, and I wish that you will, then we will find a solution. And that feels very, very helpful to even have that in the future. I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very helpful future. Okay, so can you imagine like what it's like usually it's often a brit is at the end of tefillah, and it's, you know, the baby gets brought in ceremoniously, and there's a song, there are ritual things to say, there's a blessing that the father generally says. Again, we're putting aside if there's no father in the picture, we can deal with that if that was necessary. And there's a choreography to it. You honor a grandparent if you can, a grandfather to hold the baby if possible. And then there's a seudat mitzvah, which means a meal of mitzvah, and there's special verses to say in the grace for a boy. There's also a special blessing of the mother says a special blessing, which I actually said also this Shabbat. There was a baby naming in Shul this Shabbat, so the mom said it. I actually said the same blessing, which is thanking God for saving me, because my car like died almost in the middle of the highway, which was, you know, ridiculously dangerous. But I was fine because it was just extremely traumatic and stressful, but all good. So both of us ended up saying the same blessing. And that's a blessing that the mom says because she's been through a harrowing experience. And right, we always say that anytime a mom gives birth, it's always danger, right? There's always a danger, a medical danger. So she says the blessing and we answered. And there's a special blessing, Hatov v'Hametiv, one who, meaning God, who does good and does good for others. And it's sharing the goodness that you feel from the baby and the beauty and the love and just God's benefit in the world. And so it's a special blessing, not said very often. And there's singing and dancing and a meal. And often at a Simchat Bat, there's similar, like also crafted special blessing, introduction, explain the name. That's what's going to happen at most Brit that you're going to go to, or Simchat Bat. Is that clear? Yes, no. Good, we good? I just want you to be familiar when you hear, when you get invited. Like, what does that mean? You know, what are you looking, what's going to happen when you get there, sort of. Yeah, Chelsea.
I have a question. I heard that for a Brits, you're not supposed to, like, people generally will not send an invite. They'll just say this is when it is, because like you're not actually supposed to turn it down if you get an invitation to it,
That
because
is
it's a
such an
mitzvah.
amazing nuance. I am so impressed. Exactly.
Oh, thanks.
In general, when one is invited to partake in a mitzvah, then you shouldn't say no. But you know, it's usually within a few days, right? Unless you have a C-section, and then you know exactly when the, you know, and the mom, then you know when the 8th day is. Then it's usually, you know, baby's born. 2 to 3 to 4 days later, you put together a brief and you get an invitation. You're like, I can't leave. I'm out of the country. I'm away. I can't cancel. So that's actually true, Chelsea. That's such a nice nuance. So usually what doesn't say you are invited, it says there is going to be a brief. They still might ask you to RSVP just because they need to know numbers. But yes, that's really beautiful. Did people follow the logic of that? It's kind of like a nuance. Everybody followed that? Very nice, Chelsea. Well done. Oh, it's
Thanks. Actually, my
Hadassah.
question was,
Hattie. Yeah,
my
go
question
ahead.
was, is there anything else that's like that, or is it just because of like the quick turnaround and
Just because of
it's
the
sort
quick
of like,
turnaround. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. It's that's true. It's very unusual, but it's true. Maybe I'll add that to the file. Yeah. The other thing is, okay, a little nuance. If the brief comes out on Shabbat, let's say the baby's born. My daughter was born on Shabbat. Now, she was a girl, so it wasn't relevant. But if she had been a boy, the 8th day would be Shabbat. Remember, we said that. It's always the same day as the day the baby's born. That's the 8th day. Because you add 1 + 7, and then you get there to the same day. So, are you allowed to do a brief on Shabbat? So, yes, you are allowed. Even on Yom Kippur, you would do a brief. On Sukkot, you would do a brief. Any day, you would do a brief if it's the 8th day, because the 8th day is the biblical mitzvah, and the biblical mitzvah outweighs Shabbat. It's like pushes aside Shabbat. They have equal balance. But let's say the baby was a little jaundiced and it's the 9th day or the 10th day. Even though now he could have it, you wait till Sunday. The only time it has the exact amount of weight as Shabbat is when it's exactly 8 days. And I believe if the baby was born by C-section, it's also because when a baby's born by C-section, you could argue, well, maybe the baby, if we hadn't taken it, theoretically, if we hadn't had a C-section, maybe the baby would have been born, 1 day later. So maybe that 8th day isn't exactly right. So it's only when the baby is born naturally, or vaginally rather, and the 8th day comes out on Shabbat. In other words, he's able to have his brief on the 8th day. Now, in places like England, they never do it on Shabbat. They always say, oh, then he doesn't weigh enough, he's it. I don't know. They just don't do them. It's one of their things. They always find, like, the mohel finds a reason that for some reason the baby can't. I can't explain it to you. That's what they do there. Maybe it could be, by the way, speaking to what Gabby asked, they just didn't have a mohel many places. So he couldn't always come for the whole Shabbat. Remember, if a mohel comes for Shabbat, he's stuck there the whole Shabbat. So not everybody wants to leave, but in Israel, people would walk. There was a mohel, he'd walk an hour and a half, 2 hours, because he didn't want to come for the whole Shabbat. So he'd walk. I guess he'd bring if there was an Eruv he could carry, he might have brought his things with him. But anyway, or he brought it before Shabbat, whatever. Great question. All right, what's the next? Everybody good with me now? We're good? We're okay, everybody? Okay. The next thing that we have is something called an upshirin, or called in Israel a halakha. Now, you may not have heard of it, an upshirin. An upshirin in Yiddish actually means shearing, shearing. And what it means is that there's a Hasidic ritual to grow the baby boy's hair till age 3. You might have seen, like, Hasidic boys that they have ponytail, or you might have seen that. Even in our shul, we have people who, and it's not a Hasidic shul, we have people who have baby boys and they're growing their baby's hair until age 3, and they put little ponytails. And then my grandson had that, and so cute, had the cutest curls. And all of a sudden, when they're 3, and you make it, I have pictures of it. My daughter actually knows how to do hair, and she knows how to cut. So she was there doing it. Like, it was really sweet to see. Yeah, cut here, do this. And she always shapes he has beautiful curls. Now, I am not 100% sure what that is from. It's some kind of mystical good luck thing, but not everybody does it. Now, Martin, for example, my husband, it's so interesting to me because he wasn't fully keeping Shabbat at the time. He was eating kosher, but his home wasn't a Shabbat observant home. But this, for some reason, was a custom that was meaningful to him. So his 2 sons, in fact, he himself has a ponytail, and he said he started it when his son was a year and a half, and they put his hair in beautiful, beautiful hair, put his hair into a ponytail. By the way, today, that same son wears the ponytail like a man knot. It looks great on him. But Martin has always, and he said, I'm going to ponytail like my son. I'm going to have solidarity with him, and he's kept it till today. So sometimes there are customs that they're not halachic, but they feel for whatever reason like they have some sort of weight and they're meaningful to you. And I would say to people, if that feels for whatever reason meaningful to you, unless there's a reason not to do it, I would say go for it. You do what feels like it adds spirituality or value. I'd have to ask my husband why it was important to him. Why was it important to you, Martin, to grow Ben's hair? Why was that something that was meaningful? Where did that come from? Oh, nice. So there is a teaching that when they cut their hair at 3, that's the first time, that's when they start learning Torah. And often they put tzitzit on. That's the clothing, the ritual garment. They have to be toilet trained before you can do that. So for Martin, it was a way to enter him into the world of Torah. You never said that to me. That's beautiful. With my son. I did. I asked you many times. Totally asked you. So that is beautiful. And that is the custom, is that marks their starting of learning Torah. So I think that's all I feel like that's all the baby rituals, I believe. File. I have a little more information in my file. I might add a little bit more, but that's most of it, just so that you have a feeling. Did that make sense? Like, you can always look at my file. It has a short list of them. If it, was happening to you, or you were going to one, you can always quick look it up in My Jewish Learning, or Chabad has information, or Aish has, you can always, I love My Jewish Learning, that. I find it very easy. Those are so as you can see, it's important in Judaism to mark things. Really important to mark, to stop, to celebrate the moment, to gather people together and create a moment out of it. Make it something beautiful. Girl, boy, whatever. Boy just has more he has to do, but we can mark it with a girl as well. And those are the life cycles at the beginning. All right. The next time we'll do, as I said, bar, bat mitzvah, engagement, wedding, divorce, just so that you know what that's about. And then we'll end with end of life, mourning, things like that, so you know about it. Any questions? No questions? Okay. I know it's still a really difficult time for anybody associated with the Jewish people, and the heaviness is felt all the time. And I just wanted to acknowledge that Everybody smiles a little bit smaller or a little bit shorter or not quite as often. And the worry is there and the anxiety and reading another article, this article, that it's hard. It's just hard. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And sending love to everybody. Yeah, Jeff.
I just wanted to
You're
echo
unmuted.
your sentiment to everybody, because I mean, to become a Jewish person when the world is in a way rallying against you, this is a testament to your character and your devotion to this religion. So I'm impressed with all of you. But I also just thought of a question I had. But it's really, I don't know if it's a psychological
Yeah.
question or a child development question, but I've
Yeah.
witnessed many little boys at their upshearing right before, and I saw them kind of growing up, always joyful, always smiling. After the upshearing, they look like little businessmen. Like
I
they're
know,
all
right?
now, but they're serious. Like what brought on the seriousness?
I don't, I think that just happened. I don't think they all become serious.
Okay, well, these four
I
kids were
think they
really
just look, even those particular ones, look, they may have been serious because they don't know what to do. Like their head feels lighter and,
okay.
you know, they feel cold and they're not quite sure what's expected of them. Everybody made a big deal about them. So I think it's just that. I'm sure the next day or, you know, a few days later. Yeah. I think you're right, though, that they just look like big kids all of a sudden overnight, not like little. And I want to say there are people here who are on the path to conversion. There are people who are learning about Judaism to be more knowledgeable and just to feel more connected. And all of that is important. But it is still about aligning with the values and with the Jewish people. And all of that is respected and loved. And one should know that. Reach out if you need or want something. Chelsea, how's it going for you? Wait, we can